Hello, today is a bonus Saturday episode talking all about classes. So stay tuned to hear more about classes that I think you should take during pregnancy and preparing for postpartum.
This is Kaylee Daily, the bi-weekly podcast about all things doula tips and tits, where we answer one question about pregnancy, labor, postpartum, or lactation in order to have your journey in this parenting world be just a little bit more informed and filled with consent.
Hello and welcome to Kaylee Daily. I am Kaylee Harad, your host, doula, educator, etc. And today we are diving into what classes are needed for preparation for birth and postpartum. Now, this is always non-medical advice. It is education and entertainment. And so ask your own medical team if you have questions about your health. Now that lovely disclaimer is out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about classes and education and preparation for birth and postpartum. So one of the things that can often happen when you are getting ready for having a baby is that you prepare for like one thing or two things, right? But not everything, and you're not quite sure which things you should prepare for. Now, I have clients and students all along this spectrum, right? Some are like, Kaylee, give me every single class and I'm taking all of them. And others are like, give me the bare minimum, right? So, one of the things that I think everyone needs is some kind of understanding of labor, because then the process of labor is less fear-inducing, right? So I think that is really important. The other thing is basic understanding of your rights and your options and what you maybe want in the midst of labor and delivery, okay? Now, both of those things can be found in most childbirth education classes. That is one of my recommendations. I have my own, of course, birth prep blueprint that you have heard about on these lovely podcast episodes. I do really find that childbirth education is like the bare minimum. Like if you are pregnant, going to have a baby, you need childbirth education, okay? Now, what other classes on top of that are important? So every childbirth education is different, but like mine, for instance, the birth prep blueprint, it does include some basic breastfeeding or chest feeding information, and it does include some basic postpartum information, like what will your newborn be like in the first couple hours, right? And like, what might you feel in the first couple hours? And what do you want to look for the first couple hours, okay? So it's really basic because the class is not intended to be a thorough postpartum or breastfeeding, chest feeding class, but it does include some of that information, okay? Now, the other thing I think you need if you're about to have a baby is postpartum preparation. Now, if you've been listening for the last couple episodes, you know that I have a postpartum preparation class now. And it's a little bit different than most classes because it really focuses on things that typical folks won't talk about, right? So like I have taught a bunch of different childbirth classes, and all childbirth curriculums that I've used include something about postpartum. And it's things like you might feel like emotional, or maybe you'll be like sore and you should be resting, right? Now that stuff's important, but I also am like, well, you need to wipe really gently or else your privates are going to be raw. I'm saying privates only because I think YouTube and podcasts might censor me. I don't want to get in trouble with anyone, but I think the class is less like standard curriculum and more Like, listen, some people have dryness after a vaginal delivery. Why is that? And what can you do about it, right? Some people have a sensitivity to pads against their body in postpartum. Why is that? What can you do about it, right? Because I want you to know some of the things that could happen that you might be like, what the heck is this? And why did no one tell me that I might wake up with a night sweat? Why did no one tell me that I was gonna start having my hair fall out? Like, these are things that are surprising sometimes in the postpartum time, in a time that can in a way that can be really a hang up, right? Like a really big discouragement. So that class I think is really amazing. I fully acknowledge that I am biased to both of those classes because I made them and teach them and think they're fantastic. Um, However, I do think some sort of postpartum preparation class is really, really important. Now, my class doesn't only go over like, what if your hoo-ha is like dry and, irritated from pads? It also goes over like what kind of food can be helpful and how do you get help from people? How do you prepare for stuff, right? Like what should you have like in your space that you can have next to you? Um so it's also like lovely positive things and education and preparation. So not just like maybe your hoo-ha will be raw, right? Like nothing, that's not the only thing I talk about. So then the other thing I think that's really helpful is some kind of feeding class. So depending on what your plan and hope is for feeding, I think having some kind of class around that is really important. Now, formula feeding, that might sound like really silly, but actually, how to feed a bottle, what kind of bottle to use, like what speed of nipple, how to safely prepare formula, all of that's important. You can find a pretty good tutorial or small class on that online. So I'm not saying you have to sign up for like a hundreds of dollars class that is formula feeding, but there are ways to do it wrong, right? And there are ways to do it safer and better for you and for baby. So I do recommend taking a class on that. Obviously, if you are lactating, I recommend a class on that for two reasons. One, because again, you haven't fed a baby probably. And for two, because there are lots of logistics involved in like the process your body is doing. And I firmly believe education is helpful in that process, but also for you to understand what's normal and what's not normal so that you can seek help if something's happening that's not normal. Because I find more often than not, people kind of suffer through things in breastfeeding and chest feeding that should not be suffered through and don't get help as quickly as they maybe need to get help. Okay. So that's another reason I really like that kind of class. Now, I want to touch on a couple other types of classes about which maybe you haven't heard or maybe you don't need, right? Depending on your circumstances. One is some kind of baby care class. So that class typically teaches things like diapering and swaddling and like bathing and what's normal and safe, right? Those classes are offered both online and in person. So I also offer that class actually. I offer it via Zoom, like virtually is the word, or in person, privately in the DC area. But there are lots of options again. And I think there are some really great YouTube videos if you just need one of those techniques. Like you don't need a whole class. You just want some like swaddling ideas, right? So then just look it up on YouTube. The other kind of class that some parents like to take is a CPR class, an infant CPR especially. Now, I think that's really amazing. I think if you don't know CPR well, that's important. Again, you can learn a lot of the techniques on YouTube, but you won't, of course, be certified and you won't have someone telling you that you're actually doing it correctly. So I do think if you have the space and capacity, doing an infant CPR class is not a bad idea. And then there are some classes that are focusing on the relationship between partners when you're about to have a baby. I think that's really helpful, especially if you're nervous about that, Or if you have some communication challenges already, those will be highlighted in the postpartum time. And so having a good foundation for that is important and helpful if you're entering into this journey with a romantic partner. Now, the last class I'll mention that I really like is a sleep class. Now, I have one I specifically like. So I'm going to have links to all of these different options. Some of the classes I like that are them, but you can also, of course, like search and find your own stuff. But I'm going to link to some of the ones that I really love. The sleep class that I love is, again, offered virtually, so you can take it anywhere. And it really dives into what's normal, what's not normal, how to support sleep. Sleep is such a hard thing in the early weeks because, well, early years, because babies are unpredictable, right? They're their own little thing, and none of us have met your baby yet. And so it's important to know what the range of normal is so that you know, again, when there's some kind of concern or when your baby is slightly outside of that range. So I just want you to think about what you know about those norms and if that would be a helpful thing to add to your list of classes. All right, so this has been your bonus Saturday episode because my postpartum prep class is on pre-sale ending today. So if you listen to this today is your absolute last chance to get that class at the pre-sale price of $37. So you'll own that class forever, right? So that's a class that you can keep using all throughout the postpartum time. And then all throughout your next postpartum time if you're having another baby. So it is going up in price tomorrow because it will go live. And then I will tell the world about it in a different kind of way. So it's going to be $77 starting tomorrow. That's the price of the class always. So that's full cost. But today it's only $37. So if you're listening to this on Saturday, April 30th, 2022, you have one last chance today to grab that class at $37. The link is in the show notes. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Edited and produced by Kaylee Harrod, as I'm sure you can probably tell. And our amazing music is credited in the show notes as well. So we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And in the meantime, have wonderful and consent-filled births.